Good morning, Mr. Udemezwe. Thanks for joining us on the program. Now, in late August, when buying agents and companies and third parties were removed from assessing the SME's forex window through the Form M forex purchases, did you expect any difference in the exchange rate?
Well, let me just say with due respect to the central bank that they are overburdened, in their task to apply monetary policy levers to support the economy. But it still remains a fact that the Central Bank of Nigeria has got to a point of monetary policy exhaustion. They are trying to use monetary policy to solve Nigeria's problem both on short-term and long-term basis, and it will never be effective. At the risk of sounding uncharitable to the central bank, the policy reversals and somersaults we are seeing are just inevitable. They will continue to make all kinds of announcements, all kinds of threats to FX suppliers, in the bid to improve liquidity of FX supply, because we are facing a huge supply side problem. But all those announcements they are making, including the one you just mentioned now, and all the restrictions in customer-to-customer transactions, and all the other measures they are trying to use to curtail abuse of the FX will never work. Both from a moral point of view and from even a technical point of view, the central bank can never solve this problem the way they're going. If you remember, earlier in the year, the official rate for Naira-dollar exchange was 307, and around March, it moved. They had to bring it close to the I&E window price to 360. And just recently again, we saw that move to 380. Some 2, 3, 4 years ago, we had made this point repeatedly, that the central bank had to be bold to close the gap between the several rates available in the market. You have the official rate, you have the I&E window rate, you have the some dealers rate, banks rate, you have the black market rate, you have all kinds of rate, transfer rate, and so on. And all that speaks to the fact that Nigeria is a nation in trouble, that our balance of payment is we have a total imbalance in trade. No matter how you want to put it, anytime you have a situation where you bring in little effects in terms of your exports, particularly when we have a monoproduct economy where our export is purely or 95% oil and gas products, you find that what we get is no more enough to meet the demand for FX. And in this supply-demand dynamics, there's no way you can stop people from demanding or asking for something they find utility for. So even if you cut off all the avenues, shut people off from getting FX through the dealers or other platform you provided, that demand must find its way somewhere else. So the issue we have in this country is supply-side challenge. The demand remains strong as long as we don't produce what we eat, as long as we import most of the things that we consume in this country. And you find that because we need these things and we have to find them one way or the other, people must make this demand. Then do we have enough supply of FX to enable people to get these things from anywhere in the world they want to get them? So that's the challenge. And how do we solve this? If we have enough time in this program, I will still profile my solution. I've mentioned this over time. When Egypt was faced with the same problem with Nigeria, they took a drastic measure, which we refuse to take. And those who always feel that they love this country more than some of us who have been talking about central bank facing the reality of finding an appropriate pricing for our currency, they keep saying, oh, we cannot liberalize the market, we cannot allow it float, even in a managed form. And over the years, you see us getting worse and worse by the months, by the years. Some 2 years ago, we were somewhere at 200 and something, and even the futures market said that our right pricing would be 225 at some point when we were doing 160 or 180. We didn't agree with them, and they said if we had done that and merged all the rates, we will bring about a more efficient supply of FX. There's a big liquidity right now. Our external reserve is depleting, going down every other day because the supply of FX is much, much, much lower than the demand. And all these rules they are ruling out, you must bring in, exporters must bring in their FX to the central bank. They cannot sell to other people who need them. They will never work, without sounding immodest or uncharitable. Because the point is that even in that policy where exporters are forced to report their FX central bank, who will do that? When you know that central bank itself are constantly selling these FX, on a platform where people buy them I'll round trip them. It's morally wrong. Anytime you have multiple rates of FX, you encourage bad behavior, you encourage misappropriation of these funds, you encourage inefficient allocation of resources, and you encourage criminal activities. People get this FX at some rate, some funny rate, maybe 380 today, and the next second they sell at 460, 470. Why wouldn't they continue to do that? And then as an exporter, I suffer, I go to the farm, I struggle and do all kinds of things. I'm bringing my FX, I submit it to you, central bank, at 360 or 380. Meanwhile, when I buy things in the market, I buy at the rate of 470, 480. I won't do that. What ends up happening is that the little FX providers, small exporters are forced to report these things grudgingly. And the big players, I don't want to call them here, the big players continue to send their FX to anywhere in the world they want without reporting to central bank.
But Mr. Demezwe, yes,
issued by central bank, nothing is done.
All right, Mr. Demezwe, beside the limit to US dollar card transactions and, of course, FCI bank transfers, the latest restriction is that of customer-to-customer transactions. What do you consider as the significance of that directive?
Excuse me, I didn't get that, please.
I was talking about the customer transactions, which is the latest now. So what do you consider as the significance of that directive? That's if you've read the report and other details that emanate from it.
Okay, when you try to curtail customer-to-customer transactions, central bank is just trying to limit, how people use the FX, in their position. Sometime earlier, if you read the news, you also noticed that central bank, placed the accounts of some dealers, on suspension, what they call post-no debit. They can bring in FX, but they wouldn't, spend them because there was fear that they could sell them to the market on their own and maybe deny central bank of control of those FX distribution and all of that. So the customer-to-customer thing is still part of the desperate effort to limit people, doing panic buying, people doing speculative purchase of FX, possibly to save it for a later day when it might hit 600, as speculators will always tell you, and all of that. So they're trying to see how they can curtail, customers. But in a real market, that's actually what should be done. People should be able to get FX, from any source they could find. And that way, suppliers are free to bring in their money, knowing that they will sell it at a normal, at a unified market rate. And when you make this thing available, Mr. A, Mr. B can sell whatever FX they get in. This speculation will end. So with all these rules central bank is placing, they're trying to fuel speculation more and more. These are desperate measures, and the market always reads them, that central bank has lost it. And by issuing out these directives, they're sending more and more uncertainty, more and more fear in the market that they are unable to manage the flow of FX in the market. So, restricting customer transaction, restricting, how exporters use their FX inflows and all of that are all recipe to, continued FX scarcity. It will never help us. So the only way is that if central bank can find a way and, face the consequences like Egypt did, to unify the rates, let the rate at which government buys FX be very close, if not exactly the same, to the rate at which businesses buy them. The INE window, if it reflects the real rate for us, let that rate not be far away from the black market rate. But once it is not the same and the gap is much, people will always come to INE window, find any way to document their transaction, get the cheap fund, and come and round trip it in the black market. It's only when you unify or at least reduce the gap between these rates that you can find a free flow of FX, both at the supply end and and demand end. And once the flow becomes very free, speculations will be eliminated. And then person-to-person sales can happen without any consequences. And exporters can bring in their money knowing that the rate is the same everywhere. So whether they give it to central bank or they sell it by themselves, it won't make any difference. Nigeria has a big challenge that we have refused to face. We're still applying the ostrich mentality of hiding our face in the ground when the real issue is facing us. Can we be bold enough to do like Egypt did? And today, Egypt represents the highest FDI inflow into Africa because they were bold enough to unify their rates. Yes, it spiked their inflation rate. It spiked, a lot of trouble in the economy. Prices went so high. But over time, because Egypt, maintained the pound at, a single rate, there was no more uncertainty. All the foreign direct investors foreign portfolio investors no longer had any concerns bringing their fund into Egypt. And before you knew it, Egypt became Africa's foremost destination for foreign direct investment and even foreign portfolio investment. That was about 3-4 years ago. Nigeria refused to do that, and we kept holding it down because we seem to have a large external pool of reserves at that point. Today, that reserve has moved from $45 billion to nearly $34 billion. And it keeps getting worse, in this regime of COVID, where oil price has hit some low and is not very eager to move up again until we find solution to COVID and until all the players in OPEC plus, if that still exists, are able to resolve the supply cut measures. Pending when that happens, oil price remains at the region of $42 to $47 per barrel, which is not quite profitable for Nigeria. And unfortunately, even when we make the money in oil, crude oil sale, Nigeria still goes back to lose all of that when we import petroleum products. Even though subsidy has been somewhat removed, it still costs us a lot to import this product when we can produce it locally, create employment, and curtail our FX demand. And I made a comment earlier that central bank is trying to use monetary policy levers to solve this problem. But what you find at the end of the day is that the only solution to Nigeria's problem, if I must give that a shot at this point, in the medium to long term, Nigeria must cut off every item that we import foolishly, that we ought not to import to start with. If you can remove petroleum product importation from our a basket of imported goods, if we remove that, we can cut our FX demand by almost 30% or 40%. If we're able to ensure that our refineries in Port Harcourt, Kaduna, Dangote refinery, and other modular refineries that we can encourage, let's bring in the private sector and supply them with this crude oil. They refine for us. They can have a deal with NNPC, and we cut off this FX demand. Can we also pay attention to agriculture? Make sure that from Taraba to Katsina to Ebonyi State to Enugu to everywhere that we can produce rice, that local rice becomes prevalent in all our markets, and that FX we spend foolishly in importing rice can be cut away, and several other things that we import that we don't need to import because we have arable land here, we have solid minerals that we don't process. We begin to look at post-harvest technology in the agricultural value chain, such that every agri product that we produce raw from the farm, we can also process them. How can you have all the pyramids of groundnut and other grains in this country?
I do apologize. I would have to cut you at this point, Mr. Odemezwe. Please just hold on to your thoughts. We'll continue this conversation in just a moment. Welcome back. We still have the Managing Director and Chief Executive of Flame Academy and Consultant, Mr. Oji Udemezwe, talking about the latest developments in the foreign exchange markets. Thank you, Mr. Udemezwe, for sticking around. Now, recently, the accounts of some 38 firms were frozen on account of forex infractions. How many of such sanctions do you expect in the financial system?
We will get tired of saying some of these things over time, but it is well. We will get there. By freezing accounts of companies who perhaps receive inflows of FX and sometimes decide to sell it by themselves to be able to match the market rate, what you're going to be doing is to scare people away all the more. And then the problem continues without end. You could sanction them, but you cannot solve the economic problem. These companies, buy inputs, they pay salaries, and they do all kinds of things at the current rate of, prices in the market. Then when they bring in their FX, you insist that they will subsidize it to the government by selling to you at some crazily low rates. Yes, because you're the regulator, you could hit them on the head, but at the end of the day, you create, jitters, you create fear in the market.
But Mr. Odemezwe, these companies are said to have committed infractions. Shouldn't they actually be sanctioned for the offenses?
Well, as long as you have a rule that they have disobeyed, you can call it infraction. But I'm saying those rules, are we supposed to have those rules there? So if they have disobeyed the sanction, yes, please, by all means, sanction them. I'm not saying they shouldn't be sanctioned. And such sanctions may continue. But you find that as you pursue these people, let me give you an analogy. You know that rats love fish, all right? And then you have some fish you want to protect. you leave that fish in the open, in a cage, where you know rats will clearly go and attack that fish. And you now warn all the rats in Nigeria to say, no rat should come near this fish. If you do, I will sanction you. Now, no matter how much sanction you announce, any rat that is what's called a rat must come near that fish and maybe run a risk of being sanctioned. Why don't you remove the fish? Why don't you remove the big gap between all kinds of rates we have in the market? That's the only way you can find an end. Otherwise, rats will always hang around where you have fish. You can never do away with that. Let us look at more solid, short-term to long-term solution to this problem. So we'll stop running around the circle in the country. Why don't we look at ways to boost FX inflow through our monetary policies and fiscal policies, to boost export by all levels, to support SMEs, to create a very good business environment for SMEs to thrive, to do deliberate, like they were talking about a few minutes ago on your program, in the African Free Trade Continental Agreement. That's a way to boost inter-Africa trade, whereby our demand for FX, because if we have a common African currency, the ECOWAS currency and all of that, our demand for US dollar will drop significantly. And we can trade within ourselves. So many things we cross Africa to go and buy in China and other places, we can do it within ourselves. And even the FX, so many things that we also have rotting away in Nigeria because we cannot meet Europe standard and American standard of export. We can send them to Uganda. We can send to Kenya. We can send to South Africa and other places, and we can intertrade and improve our self-sufficiency and drop our huge demand for FX. So let's look at those directions. Let our fiscal policy in Nigeria, encourage states to become very entrepreneurial in driving revenue. Let's not keep gathering in Abuja every month to share handouts, and we remove incentive for governors of states to drive their states as business enterprises, where every form of resource in this country, vegetables, grains, animal husbandry, and all kinds of things are brought to the market, particularly the export market, so we can diversify our export earnings and stop this carrot and stick approach to FX management. Enough is enough. Let fiscal policies in this country ramp up enough to join central bank. Let me also say that central bank has been doing their best. I'm not in any way trying to rebuke them excessively. They are doing their best. Governor Emefiele is trying his best. But all I'm saying is that his best will never solve our problem, because there are several issues that must be taken into consideration to complement the effort of the central bank. They have even gone away from monetary policy to pursue fiscal policy incentives by doing anchor borrowing programs and all kinds of things to provide easy access to funds, to businesses. The fiscal policy levers must be drawn to government grants and government vote of funds to support business environmental development, infrastructure development, to enable SMEs to work better and improve our export. This is very important in the medium to long term. Otherwise, this carrot and stick approach, knocking people on the head, sanctions everywhere, will continue unabated, will continue endlessly. So central bank is doing their best. Let the fiscal policy people, also let the Ministry of Finance and the FEC, Federal Executive Council, also meet them with policies that will encourage long-term improvement of FX supply. If people are bringing money through international money transfers, they cannot do that anymore, because if somebody is sending money to the family by way of what do you call them again? All these money transfer systems, you don't expect the person in America to send money and the mother or the brother will go and exchange it at 380 when they know that the real market price is 470. So that way you shut down the international money transfer sources of FX. Foreign investors cannot come in, because already Nigeria is a nation in war, insecurity, problems everywhere, instability in policies and so on. So you don't have foreign direct investment. And to worsen the situation, foreign portfolio investors cannot also come in, because our rates are quite low for them now. And the effective rate in the economy today is negative. Inflation is at about 13.22% today, while the MPR was just reduced 2 days ago to 11.5. I'm not saying they should not reduce MPR. Central bank is actually confused as it is, because one policy they are trying to execute counters other policies. The rate reduction 2 days ago is good for the economy to thrive, in that there will be lower interest rates for business to borrow. That's just CBN justification. But then, as you do that, be mindful of the fact that our inflation rate is now 13.22, while the MPR, the benchmark interest rate, is 11.55, meaning that in this country today, the view of the world is that Nigeria has a negative interest rate. So portfolio investors who are looking for effective yield in their investment will never inflow their funds. So we are trapped in a situation whereby only central bank will keep supplying FX by depleting our external reserve, and other sources of FX supply will remain, standby till further notice. That's
now,
a big issue.
when you look at the current exchange rate of the dollar at 460 to 465 to a dollar now, how sustainable do you think that is?
Well, that rate is not sustainable. To be fair to this country, Naira ought not to be selling at 460 or 465 to $1. We could do better. But when the supply is not certain and the rules are so tight that you cannot get this dollar easily, you tighten all the other sources of remember that people that are going to be taking the hit on this are smaller dealers, smaller importers, smaller exporters, importers who have been shut out from the official market. Remember those 41 items and more added today who are told you cannot get FX from central bank because what you are importing, we don't need to import them. Or we want to apportion that FX to other sectors that need that money more than you. So are you saying that you close down? You have not declared their businesses illegal. You have not banned them from operating. You've only excluded them from official window to get FX. They will get it elsewhere. And the more desperate they get in trying to sustain their businesses by getting FX to bring in input materials and other imports that they do, the more desperate they get, the more they are willing to pay for a dollar with local currency. But when you do a bit more liberalization, close the gaps down, it will hurt us temporarily for a while. But if you now say that official rate will now become, let's say, 420 naira to $1. But in doing that, you allow freedom. If you export, sell to whoever you want, and all the exporters, in fact, you are going to drive export. Because what we're doing currently is that we are inadvertently closing down export, which we need most, at this point in this country. So when exporters have to fight, do all the measures, package their product very well, suffer a lot to bring in FX, and you tell them you must sell it at a government rate of 380. You discourage exports, which will worsen our situation in medium to long term. So why don't we bring a rate that will be uniform, even though it will appear, because we've been saying we don't want to devalue, but then we have been having depreciation of this currency. And as it depreciates more, government is forced to devalue because they are not at the same time. Depreciation means that by forces of demand and supply, your currency gets weaker against foreign currency. Devaluing is to deliberately bring the price to where you think we unify these things and make it. So as we keep saying we will not devalue, we are being forced to devalue over time. Like we did this year, 307 to 360, now 380. Why don't you do it deliberately and as a way to harness export and remove all the fears, all the sanctions and all of that, and encourage free flow of FX amongst customers from exporters to other people who want to import. Make it free. The central bank will focus on other key monetary policy issues. And as you make it free, you are going to remove every uncertainty in the market and encourage foreign FX inflow, both through direct investments and portfolio investments. You can see that every other supply source has been shut down until they see a uniform rate that's reasonably stable, even if it's not a single rate. Let it be closed. You mustn't have more than 5 naira or 10 naira gap between one rate and the other. But once the gap is too much and too profitable, round tripping and bad behavior or corrupt practices is encouraged.
All right, Mr. Odemezwe, we need to round up in a couple of minutes, but I'll just like to ask you before I let you go, is there any possibility that the rates in Nigeria will return to the pre-COVID-19 days? You have 1 minute to answer that question. COVID has brought new dimensions to businesses. We may never return to that point. But in fact, we can actually return to that point even well before COVID. But that's only when we fix these issues I've mentioned, these medium to long-term measures. We can return to pre-COVID price, but it will take long years of good practice, long years of improving export, long years of ensuring that people are free to trade in this product, long years of encouraging foreign direct investment and portfolio investment and even local investment so that we can begin to depend on ourselves for many items. With long years of self-sufficiency, we can actually bring this currency down to 200, 300. It's possible. Long years of trying to fight to stop importing petroleum products, to stop importing rice and other things that we can produce locally. Long years of devoting our monetary and fiscal policies towards economic self-sufficiency in Nigeria. Thank you. CEO of Flame Academy and consultant, Mr. Oji Udemezue, thank you for sharing your time with us on the program this morning.